Most people don't stay poor because they're unintelligent. They stay poor because they keep making the same stupid mistakes over and over, under pressure, envy, and emotion. Here's the brutal truth about why most people never transform modest savings into genuine wealth. It has absolutely nothing to do with identifying the perfect stocks or orchestrating impeccable market timing. The mathematics of wealth accumulation is almost embarrassingly straightforward. Yet the overwhelming majority stumble not because they lack sophistication, but because they're exhausting themselves trying to appear clever when they should simply be avoiding catastrophically stupid decisions. The chasm separating those who multiply $1,000 into millions from everyone else isn't raw intellectual firepower. It's a methodical, almost religious avoidance of the specific errors that systematically obliterate capital. That subtle distinction reshapes entire lifetimes. You're about to discover precisely what those wealth-destroying errors are, why your evolutionary wiring practically guarantees you'll make them, and how to construct an ironclad system that shields you from your own worst instincts when market pressure reaches its crescendo. Let's establish what this conversation isn't. You won't find specific stock recommendations here, no Baroque timing strategies, no elaborate schemes wrapped in impressive financial jargon. If you're hunting for someone to whisper ticker symbols into your ear, you've wandered into the wrong conversation. That's not education. That's gambling dressed up in expensive tailoring. What we're examining is something far more foundational: the mental architecture and behavioral patterns that determine whether your capital compounds magnificently or evaporates tragically across thousands of individual decisions. The dividing line between someone who transforms $1,000 into $100 million and someone who vaporizes $100,000 isn't typically intelligence. It's temperament. It's patience refined to an art form. It's the extraordinary capacity to remain motionless while everyone around you either panics like the world is ending or celebrates like they've discovered immortality. Long-term financial advantage flows not from attempting brilliance, but from consistently refusing to be stupid. That might sound like dark comedy, but the mathematics is unforgiving. The returns from systematically avoiding obvious blunders dwarf the returns from executing supposedly brilliant maneuvers. Run the calculations yourself. The numbers never lie. The foundational insight about wealth creation is this: the world isn't primarily driven by greed. It's driven by envy, that corrosive emotion that poisons everything it touches. Consider what this actually means. You might be 5 times more prosperous than your parents were at your age, enjoying more financial security, more comfort, more opportunity than 99% of humans who have ever drawn breath on this planet. Yet none of this penetrates your consciousness because your brain is frantically computing that someone, somewhere has more than you possess right now. That endless comparison, that relentless measuring of yourself against others, contaminates everything. I've witnessed people earning more money than they could exhaust in 10 lifetimes, remaining profoundly miserable because someone else's portfolio is larger. Perfectly sound investment strategies get demolished because a neighbor casually mentioned their returns at a backyard barbecue. Status symbols that contribute nothing to daily existence except mounting anxiety get pursued with the desperation of people fleeing an inferno. Envy represents the most idiotic of sins. It's the only vice that delivers abundant pain with zero pleasure. Why would anyone board that particular trolley to hell? Because everyone else is already aboard. And that's precisely the worst possible justification for any financial decision. Disembarking from that trolley is your first imperative if you genuinely want to compound modest sums into substantial wealth. Stop measuring your returns against whatever your brother-in-law claims to be achieving. Stop obsessively checking your portfolio 17 times daily to verify whether you're outperforming the market this quarter. Stop caring even remotely about other people's opinions regarding your investment approach. Their judgments won't compound your capital by a single penny. Someone will always be accumulating wealth faster than you. This isn't tragedy, it's arithmetic, the simple reality of billions of people simultaneously pursuing prosperity. Where most people catastrophically miscalculate is in understanding the fundamental mathematics of wealth construction. Everyone conceptualizes building wealth as addition, accumulating more income, more investments, more assets, more achievements, operating under the assumption that more automatically equals better. That wealth emerges from stacking things until the pile reaches impressive heights. Those who actually construct enduring wealth think about it as subtraction instead. What can you eliminate? What behaviors are systematically destroying your capital? What fees are silently devouring your returns? What impulses are causing you to buy at peaks and sell at valleys? What status competitions are you engaging in that drain money while adding nothing to your actual lived experience? The system that functions is disarmingly simple. Identify what's genuinely stupid, then avoid it religiously. This won't make you the most popular guest at dinner parties, but it prevents an extraordinary amount of financial carnage. Asking what's reliably destroying your wealth and how to stop it beats asking how to generate more money. Asking which mistakes guarantee poverty beats asking which investments will make you rich. This is inversion, and it's more powerful than any stock tip you'll ever receive from anyone, anywhere. The actual mathematics becomes crystalline when you examine a legendary investment partnership that operated from 1962 to 1975. That partnership compounded at 19.8% annually, while the broader market returned a meager 5%. That 14.8 percentage point differential might not sound particularly dramatic when described year to year, but the mathematics becomes absolutely devastating over time. At 5%, $1,000 grows to roughly $1,900 over 14 years. At 19.8%, that identical $1,000 explodes to approximately $12,000. Same starting point, same time horizon, radically different destinations. What most people completely miss is that the partnership didn't achieve those extraordinary returns through brilliant predictions about the future. It achieved them by remaining consistently rational when everyone else was losing their minds and making decisions driven purely by emotion. The 1973 to 1974 bear market savaged portfolios everywhere, with losses of 31.9% in one year, followed by 31.5% the next. A $1,000 investment at the start of 1973 would have withered to a mere $467 by early 1975, a 53% decline that would make most investors panic and liquidate everything they owned in blind terror. Yet 95% of the partners in that fund stayed the course. They persevered because they understood the only thing that genuinely matters. If you're investing for the long term, periods of excruciating agony and periods of euphoric booms are both inevitable, and you must develop the capacity to live through them without destroying yourself. That's not inspirational rhetoric. That's cold arithmetic. Panicking during downturns guarantees permanent losses, while maintaining rationality provides the possibility of recovery. The mathematics doesn't care about your feelings, your anxiety, or your desperate need for reassurance. Kipling expressed it perfectly. Treat those two imposters, success and failure, just the same. Because obviously there will be failures even when making correct decisions, since nobody maintains a perfect record. Something that disturbs most people is this uncomfortable reality. Vast numbers of individuals with extraordinarily high IQs are terrible investors because they possess terrible temperaments. Having the right temperament is more important than raw cognitive horsepower, because you need to keep irrational emotion under ruthless control. You need patience and discipline and the ability to absorb losses and adversity without losing your mind. You need the ability to not be driven crazy by extreme success. Read that last part again, because success can make you just as insane as failure. The person who gets rich quickly and concludes they're a genius is being set up for catastrophic mistakes. The person who catches one winning trade and thinks they've cracked the market's code is about to surrender all their gains plus considerably more. Temperament is destiny, and temperament can be trained through deliberate experience, specifically through rigorously reviewing your mistakes. Reviewing your past stupidities makes you significantly less likely to repeat them, and that's more valuable than any stock tip ever whispered. Most people avoid this practice because they don't want to relive their failures. They want to move on, think positive, focus on the future. That's exactly how they ensure they'll repeat identical errors again and again, like actors trapped in an endless loop. Admitting you were a complete idiot actually helps. Rubbing your nose in your mistakes makes you perform better. It's a wonderful trick to learn. Almost no one does it, which means your competition, everyone else in the market, is too proud, too fragile, too busy protecting their ego to look clearly at what went wrong. If you can develop the habit of honest self-assessment, you possess an enormous advantage over nearly everyone playing the game. A principle that separates people who build wealth from people who merely fantasize about it. The big money isn't in the buying and selling, but in the waiting. Most people can't wait because they crave results now. They want validation now. They want to see progress every week, every day, every hour, checking their portfolio compulsively, as if watching the numbers will make them grow faster. Sitting there with capital and doing nothing takes genuine character. Pursuing mediocre opportunities isn't how wealth gets built. Waiting isn't laziness. Waiting is discipline. Waiting is the recognition that timing matters, that some opportunities aren't yet ripe, that premature action often destroys the very outcomes you're trying to create. The desire to get rich fast is extraordinarily dangerous. And here's the part nobody wants to hear. Someone will always be getting richer faster than you. This isn't tragedy. It's just what happens when billions of people are all simultaneously trying to make money. Some will get lucky. Some will take risks you wouldn't touch. Some will fabricate their returns to impress people at parties. The moment you start racing against others, you've already lost, because you've abandoned your own timeline for theirs. Living within your income and saving so you can invest isn't exciting. It won't generate likes on social media or impressive stories at networking events, but it works. Generations have proven it works, and it will continue working long after every get-rich-quick scheme has collapsed into lawsuits and bankruptcy filings. Something most investment content won't tell you. Effort alone is insufficient because systems matter more than hours logged. Researching stocks for 80 hours weekly still leads to lost money if the research focuses on the wrong variables. Working yourself to exhaustion analyzing charts still leads to destruction from one emotional decision when the market drops. The world doesn't care how hard you worked. The world cares what you produced. Most people focus on effort because effort is controllable and visible, and saying you worked hard feels like an accomplishment. But the market doesn't reward effort, it rewards outcomes. And outcomes depend on whether your effort was directed at things that actually matter. The critical question becomes, what inputs actually produce the outputs you want? And what inputs are you wasting on outputs that don't matter at all? Answering this requires brutal honesty with yourself. Because most people dramatically overestimate their productivity by confusing motion with progress. They're busy, but busy doing what exactly? Refreshing stock quotes. Reading financial news that generates nothing but anxiety. Arguing with strangers online about which cryptocurrency is going to explode. If your activity isn't compounding your knowledge or your capital, it's just entertainment masquerading as work. Reading is the one form of leverage that anyone can access regardless of starting capital. In my entire life, I've known no wise people across broad subject matter areas who didn't read constantly. None. Zero. Not a single exception. Reading compresses decades of someone else's learning into hours, letting you extract principles from distant domains and apply them to your own challenges. It's the closest thing to time travel that exists. You can learn from people who died centuries ago and avoid mistakes that took them lifetimes to understand. Most people stop reading seriously the moment their formal education ends, trading the leverage of accumulated wisdom for the illusion of busyness. They'll spend 3 hours watching financial news that tells them nothing useful, while 1 hour reading a book that could transform how they think seems like too much to ask. The people who rise in life aren't always the smartest, and sometimes not even the most diligent. But they are learning machines who go to bed every night a little wiser than they were when they woke up. And that helps enormously, particularly when you have a long run ahead of you. That's the system. Not brilliance, not luck, not insider information, just consistent learning compounded over time. Spending each day trying to be slightly wiser than you were when you woke up adds up day by day, And at the end of the day, if you live long enough, like most people, you'll get out of life what you genuinely deserve. Something uncomfortable needs to be said about what you think you know. Knowing what you don't know is more useful than being brilliant. The single most important thing, if you want to avoid catastrophic errors, is knowing where you're competent and where you aren't, knowing the edge of your own competency. That's extraordinarily hard to do, because the human mind naturally tries to make you think you're far smarter than you actually are. Most people overestimate their abilities in almost everything, thinking they understand markets they've never studied, thinking they can predict outcomes they have no basis for predicting, thinking their gut feelings are insights rather than biases. Smart people often do spectacularly stupid things with their money for exactly this reason. Their intelligence gives them confidence that exceeds their actual competence, and they venture outside their circle and get destroyed. Not because they're dumb, but because they're smart enough to be dangerous. The first rule is that you can't really know anything if you just remember isolated facts and try to regurgitate them. If the facts don't hang together on a lattice work of theory, you don't have them in a usable form. Understanding is not the same as knowing. You can know that a company has good financials without understanding why those financials might deteriorate. You can memorize a valuation formula without knowing when it applies and when it doesn't. Mastering the best that other people have ever figured out beats sitting down and trying to dream it all up yourself, because nobody's that smart. The best investment ideas already exist, and your job is to find them, understand them deeply, and apply them consistently. That isn't cheating, it's wisdom. Something about your daily decisions will change how you think about building wealth. People calculate too much and think too little. They run the numbers, build the spreadsheets, analyze the data, then make decisions based on what the calculations say without ever stepping back to ask if the calculations are measuring the right things. The person who optimizes their portfolio returns without considering their ability to sleep at night is calculating. The person who asks what kind of life they actually want is thinking. Tracking every penny of investment gains without considering the stress cost is calculating. Asking whether this wealth is costing you your health or your relationships is thinking. Calculation is necessary but insufficient. You need to think about what to calculate before the calculations become meaningful. Simplicity has a way of improving performance by enabling us to better understand what we're doing. When your investment strategy gets too complex, you lose the ability to reason clearly about it. You start optimizing trivial details while missing the big picture entirely, building elaborate systems that you can't actually execute under pressure when it counts. If something is too hard, move on to something else. What could be simpler than that? This isn't laziness. This is the recognition that your time and attention are finite. And spending them on investment strategies you can't understand means not spending them on strategies you can execute. A pattern repeats with depressing regularity. Someone builds wealth and then immediately destroys their own happiness with it. They build a fancy house, massive and impressive, the kind of house that makes other people envious. In practically every case, they make the person less happy, not happier. The reason is that fancy houses come with fancy problems: maintenance, staff, security concerns, the pressure to fill all those rooms with activity, and the comparison to even fancier houses that never ends. Meanwhile, people who lived in modest homes for decades, the same home for 70 years with nothing special about it, report being perfectly content because they didn't need the external validation and didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The lesson isn't about houses. The lesson is about the difference between what society tells you wealth should buy and what actually makes life good. Don't have a lot of envy, and don't overspend your income. Staying rich isn't what's difficult. Staying sane is. Something important about what you actually deserve to earn from your investments needs to be understood. The safest way to try to get what you want is to try to deserve what you want. It's such a simple idea. It's the golden rule. You want to deliver to the world what you would buy if you were on the other end. Applied to investing. This means asking yourself whether you deserve the returns you're expecting. Have you put in the work to understand what you own? Have you developed the temperament to hold through volatility? Have you built the knowledge base to recognize opportunity when it appears? Most people want investment returns they haven't earned, wanting outcomes without inputs, expecting the market to reward them for showing up as if participation deserves a trophy. The market doesn't work that way. You might get lucky once or catch a bubble at the right time, but over time, the market is remarkably good at giving people what they deserve. If you're building knowledge and developing patience and maintaining discipline and making rational decisions, you'll probably end up okay. If you're cutting corners and chasing tips and optimizing for short-term gains at long-term costs, you'll probably end up with exactly what those behaviors deserve. What nobody talks about when discussing how to build wealth is the role of reliability. Fancy theories about investing exist, along with complex strategies and elaborate systems. But the foundation underneath all of it is boring and simple. Do what you say you're going to do. Be reliable with your contributions. If you say you're going to invest $500 a month, invest $500 a month without skipping months when you feel pessimistic, and without doubling up when you feel optimistic. Just do what you said you would do. Be reliable with your strategy. If you say you're a long-term investor, be a long-term investor without becoming a day trader the moment the market gets volatile, and without abandoning your approach because someone at a party told you about something better. McDonald's is one of our most admirable institutions, not because of the food, but because it provides first jobs to millions of teenagers, many troubled, and successfully teaches them the one lesson they most need: to show up reliably for responsible work. That's it. Show up. Do what you said you'd do. Meet your own commitments to yourself. Mentioning it sounds so basic that it seems almost embarrassing. But look around at the people who fail to build wealth despite having every advantage: good income, long time horizon, access to information. And you'll find unreliability at the root. They couldn't be consistent. They made plans they didn't keep. They committed to strategies they abandoned. Over time, no amount of intelligence could compensate for the broken commitments to themselves. Reputation and integrity are your most valuable assets and can be lost in a heartbeat. This applies to your reputation with yourself. Every time you abandon your own investment plan, you lose credibility with yourself. Every time you break your commitment to stay the course, it gets easier to break it again. An uncomfortable truth about why smart people fail to build wealth involves psychological denial. There's no way that you can live an adequate life without many mistakes. And in fact, one trick in life is to get so you can handle mistakes. Failure to handle psychological denial is a common way for people to go broke. What psychological denial looks like in investing is this: you've made an enormous commitment to something you've poured money in, and the more you put in, the more your brain's consistency principle makes you think that now it has to work. That if you put in just a little more, then it will work. That's the sunk cost fallacy dressed up in hope, and it destroys portfolios. The investment is down 50%, and you should probably cut your losses, but you've already put so much in, and admitting it was a mistake feels terrible. So you tell yourself it will come back. You tell yourself you're being patient. You tell yourself all the rational-sounding things that let you avoid the painful truth. The reality is too painful to bear, so you distort it until it's bearable. Everyone does this to some extent. The question is whether you catch yourself doing it before the damage becomes irreversible. A majority of life's errors are caused by forgetting what one is really trying to do. You started investing to build wealth and freedom, but now you're holding a position to avoid admitting you were wrong. Clear goals existed at the start, but now you're optimizing for ego protection instead of capital preservation. Always go back to the original question: what am I actually trying to accomplish? And is what I'm doing right now moving me toward that? Or have I gotten lost in protecting my self-image? What actually predicts whether someone will compound wealth over a lifetime is not intelligence, not starting capital, not connections. It's the willingness to look stupid while learning. It's not shameful to be stupid, but it's dishonorable to stay stupid when you could learn. That distinction matters. The people who build wealth over decades are the ones who accept temporary embarrassment in exchange for permanent knowledge, asking questions that seem dumb, admitting what they don't understand, seeking out correction rather than avoiding it. Acquiring worldly wisdom and adjusting your behavior accordingly is the path. And if your new behavior gives you a little temporary unpopularity with your peer group, then to hell with them. Notice the trade-off. You might lose social approval from people who aren't learning. You might look foolish to people who've stopped growing. That's the price of getting better. The alternative is to protect your ego and avoid correction and stay exactly where you are. Most people choose this path because they'd rather be consistently wrong than temporarily embarrassed. Those who will not face improvements because they are changes will face changes that are not improvements. The investing world moves forward whether you adapt or not, and if you refuse to learn, you don't stay the same. You fall behind while everyone else catches up. The question that should guide everything you do with money is this: what would it take to spend your time on what you find genuinely interesting, with people you actually respect, without needing anyone's approval? That's autonomy. That's the real goal. Not wealth for its own sake, not a number in an account that you can brag about, but the freedom to live according to your own judgment, on your own terms, without external compulsion. One of the wisest investors ever explained why he left a perfectly good career in law by saying he had a considerable passion to get rich, not because he wanted Ferraris, but because he wanted the independence. He desperately wanted it, and he thought it was undignified to have to send invoices to other people. That's not greed, that's autonomy. The desire to back your own judgments with your own money, to not have to do it someone else's way when you think you know better. Most people never achieve this because they never make it the goal. They chase returns, thinking returns will buy freedom, but then become slaves to maintaining returns. They chase portfolio growth, thinking growth will bring independence, but then become prisoners of their own anxiety about losing what they've gained. The path to autonomy runs through subtraction, not addition. Remove the expenses that chain you to income you don't control. Remove the lifestyle inflation that turns raises into obligations. Remove the mental models that keep you playing games you can't win. What remains is freedom, the ability to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want. What I want to leave you with is not complicated. The best armor of old age is a well-spent life preceding it. Not a wealthy life by someone else's definition, not an impressive portfolio that looks good in screenshots, but a well-spent life. One where the money served the life instead of the life serving the money. You don't get to choose how long you live, but you get to choose how you spend the time you have. That choice, made repeatedly over decades, determines whether you arrive at the end with satisfaction or regret. Building wealth that actually improves your life isn't supposed to be easy, and anyone who finds it easy is stupid. That's not pessimism, that's realism. Effort, discipline, and the willingness to sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term flourishing are required. The principles are available, known, and the path is clear. What's missing for most people is not information, it's application. What you should take from this is straightforward. Avoid the obviously stupid things with your money, because that alone puts you ahead of most people who can't manage even that. Stop racing against everyone else and start racing against your own potential, because someone else's returns have nothing to do with your life. Review your mistakes regularly, learn from them or repeat them, because those are the only two options available. Read constantly. Go to bed knowing more than you did when you woke up, and compound knowledge the same way you compound money. Be reliable with yourself, doing what you committed to do, and protecting your credibility with yourself like the asset it is. Think in terms of deserving, asking what you would have to become to deserve the wealth you want. And remember, the goal isn't money. The goal is autonomy, the ability to spend your time on what interests you, with people you respect, without needing permission from anyone. The math works. $1,000 can become $100 million if you have enough time and avoid enough mistakes. The question is whether you're willing to do what that actually requires.